The AFC North is full of believers. Every fan base think that they're Knicks. Every quarterback has a case. Every team got a reason. And that's where things get dangerous. Because when everybody believes that they're a legitimate contender, all that means is somebody is about to be disappointed. It could be the team that paid everybody. It could be the team that won the division. Maybe it's the team that crushed the draft but still have lingering questions that needs to be answered. Or maybe it's the team that everybody just keep giving the benefit of the doubt for some reason. But whatever it may be, could be, one thing is guaranteed. Expectations are expensive. And in this division, everybody got a bill coming up. You know what I'm talking about? So today, we breaking down the AFC North draft grades and asking one question. Who has the most to prove? Hey, yo, where's my theme music?
Motion left to right, there's nothing there. Now he tries to run, breaks a tackle, dives for the end zone, fumbled the football, left sideline, midfield, 40, 30, 20, 10, touchdown!
Yeah, here we go!
Rolls back of the end zone, now CD Lamb!
Unbelievable!
We're back. You're listening to Football is Money on footballismoney.com. Here's your host. They call me boss. They call me boss. They call me boss.
Hey, yo, what's good, my fantasy family? Welcome back to Football is Money. I am your host. They call me boss. And whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast platform or tapped in through footballismoney.com, I just want to let you know that I appreciate you for being here. But before we get rolling, I got a shout out to last week giveaway winners, Real Blythe and Miss Low Key 1990. You know what I'm saying? Congratulations once again, and appreciate everybody that's been subscribing, signing up, engaging on the channel and helping keep the football conversation alive. And if your name didn't get called last week, don't worry. It may not be a wheel spin this week, but there's still plenty of opportunities to stack entries, earn gold opportunities, and put yourself in position for future giveaways. Now, today, we head into what might be the most complicated division in football, and that is the AFC North, my people. So we're going to be breaking down draft grades. We're going to be talking expectations. We're going to be talking about fantasy value, betting angles. We're going to look at the division odds, and we're trying to figure out which franchise is carrying the heaviest pressure heading into the 2026 season. Everybody in this division believes that they're a contender. The problem is only one team gets to be right. So let's talk about it and see if we can sort through it. Let's put before we put the grades on the board, let's reset this division, right? Last year didn't give us many answers. If anything, it created more questions. Like Pittsburgh won a division. Baltimore, they dealt with injuries. Cincinnati dealt with injuries. Cleveland finished at the bottom. Fast forward to today. All four teams are walking into this season from completely different angles, right? One team trying to stay on top. We don't know what that's going to look like. One team trying to get back on top. One team trying to capitalize on the championship caliber quarterback. And one team trying to figure out exactly who it wants to be. The standings told one story. The offseason told another. Let's see what the draft added to this conversation. And let's put the AFC North draft grades on the board. Here we go. Let's go over here. So Cleveland got an A-. Pittsburgh got an A-. Baltimore, B+. Cincinnati, B. At first glance, you probably say Cleveland and Pittsburgh had the strongest weekends, right? Had the strongest draft class. Baltimore wasn't far behind, and Cincinnati ended up at the bottom of the group. But draft grades only take you so far because they measure value. They measure talent acquisition. They measure how teams navigated the board. What they don't measure is pressure. They don't measure expectations, and they definitely don't measure whether those players solved the problem that existed before the draft weekend even started. And that's where things get interesting. So let's go team by team and figure out what these draft classes actually mean. All right, let's start with Cleveland. So the Browns, they earned one of the highest draft grades in the division. And the big reason wasn't one specific player. It was how they maneuvered the board, right? They turned previous moves into 2 first-round picks. I think they had 2 second-round picks and multiple other picks. Then they used those picks on players like Spencer Fano, offensive tackle out of Utah, and KC Concepcion, a wide receiver out of Texas A&M. Round 2 brought even more value. Denzel Boston, wide receiver out of Washington. Emmanuel McNeil Warren, safety out of Toledo. So there's 4 premium additions before most teams finished their second round plans. And they kept stacking depth. Austin Barber, Parker Brailsford, Justin Jefferson, Joe Royer, Taylor Green, Carson Ryan. They had 3 fifth-round pick selections to continue filling out the roster. The blueprint was easy to see, more protection, more weapons, more depth. And on top of all that, it was more youth. It don't seem like they were shopping for a quick fix. You know, they was, at some parts of the draft, tuned in and tapped into what they needed to do. And in other parts, seemed like they were just throwing picks to the wall to see what'll stick. And, you know, that's why the A- makes sense. Now, here where things get uncomfortable. Because no matter how many players Cleveland adds, every conversation eventually circles back to the same spot, to the same problem. Quarterback. Deshaun Watson is still there. Still carrying franchise quarterback money. Still carrying franchise quarterback expectations. Right? The production hasn't matched either one, though. And, you know, then Cleveland, they keep drafting quarterbacks. Last year, this year. So they not sure. Again, at some point, you got to stop collecting possibilities and start identifying a direction. Right now, Cleveland feels like a team standing in front of 3 different roads and still deciding which one to take, right? The talent is better. The depth is better. The roster is healthier than it was. The floor feels higher than it did a year ago. But until somebody grabs control of that quarterback room, every positive conversation comes with an asterisk. Fantasy manager is going to start with Concepcion in Boston, KC Concepcion and Denzel Boston. Those are the names everyone would be watching. As far as betting, Cleveland feels less like a contender and more like a team that's trying to eliminate disaster, if that makes sense. And honestly, you know, there's some type of progress. The roster looks stronger. The future look brighter. The quarterback situation still cloudy. And that's why the Browns remain one of the most fascinating teams in football right now. Because you don't know what you're going to get from them. And that's real spiel, my boy. All right, so let's move on to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh gets an A- as well. So we all know the Steelers won the division last year, right? And yet somehow this draft feels like a team preparing for tomorrow, right? They started with Mad Max, offensive tackle out of Arizona State. Then they added Jeremy Bernard, wide receiver out of Alabama. In round 3, they brought in Drew Down, man, the quarterback out of Penn State. The future immediately entered the conversation. The rest of the class continue filling holes. Dalen Everett. They got Jennings Dunker. They got Caden Wedgen, Riley Nowakowski, Gabe Rubio, Robert Spears Jennings, Eli Heidenreich. Almost every layer of the roster got touched. You know what I'm saying? And that's what stands out. This wasn't a draft built around one weakness. This was a draft built around transition. Pittsburgh, they tightened up the offensive line. They added pass catchers. They added a quarterback, which let you know that, they thinking about life after Rodgers. They added secondary help. They added depth. They added future options. And I like it, right? The organization clearly understands what's coming. Aaron Rodgers is still the starter for now, but nobody believes Aaron Rodgers is the long-term answer. We know he's not. He already said this is his last year. This feels like a franchise trying to, compete today while still quietly operating and preparing for tomorrow. And that's why the Drew Down pick matters. Drew Allar. Maybe he never becomes the guy. Maybe he does sooner than later. Either way, Pittsburgh acknowledged that the next chapter is coming. That's more football. The challenge is timing. The AFC North is impatient. This division don't care about development plans. It don't care about transition years. Every Sunday is going to be a dogfight. And that's where Pittsburgh becomes difficult to project. Because how much does Aaron Rodgers have left? Can Mike McCarthy make this thing work quickly? Can Jeremy Bernard make a difference? Can he make an impact week 1? Can the offensive line settle in? Can this roster survive while one era ends and another begins? That's the balancing act. Fantasy managers, they should keep an eye on Bernard, man. Caden Wedgen could carve out a role too. But the fantasy value of this entire offense rises and falls with Aaron Rodgers. The betting market may still treat Pittsburgh like last year's division winner. I'm not sure that's who they are anymore. Not because they're a bad team, but because they feel caught between two timelines. They got one foot in the Rodgers era and one foot in the future. The draft deserves credit. The roster got better. The challenge now is proving those improvements arrive fast enough. Expectations are expensive, man. And Pittsburgh may be paying for two different futures at the same damn time. All right, man. So before we get back to the AFC North, quick reminder. Make sure you tapped into footballismoney.com. We got the fantasy leagues there. We have the pool party, Football is Money Plus, man. Make sure y'all subscribe to that. Any football news, podcasts, updates, and everything that we're building lives there. And if you want to support the platform directly, like I said, Football is Money Plus is the best way to do so. So we all know there's not a wheel spin this week, but that doesn't mean that there are not opportunities for you to earn gold entries, blue entries, with your great football takes like y'all always give me, man. We get some good engagement on this channel, especially to be such a small channel, man. Like I said, man, great football takes, strong predictions, good questions. That's how you build entries. And speaking of questions, let me pull one up from last week's show. One of the viewers asked, and this was Marvin Agnes. He said, the biggest thing I took from this was the gap between talent and trust. A team can win the draft on paper and still not be the team you'd bet on in December. That's why Texans at number 1 in trust rankings feels right. Say they've shown more stability than the rest of the division. But curious though, If the Titans offense clicks faster than expected, do they jump all the way to number one in trust by mid-season? And, that's a good question. That's a great question. All right, so my answer, I can absolutely see Tennessee clicking faster than expected. I just don't see them jumping all the way up to number one. Houston was already ahead of them. Jacksonville is still standing in front of them. And both teams improved as well. So Tennessee getting better doesn't automatically mean everybody else stood still, right? Or got worse. Now, could they make things interesting? Absolutely, right? Could they push for a top 2 spot? Maybe. But climbing from third, fourth, all the way up to first in trust by mid-season feels like a stretch. But where Tennessee clicking early could really matter is fantasy football and in your betting slips. Because if Cornell Tate produces immediately, if Cam Ward starts putting up numbers, if those props start cashing, like if the offense becomes more efficient, that's where the value going to show up first. Fantasy lineups and in your parlay slips. That's the area where I expect Tennessee's growth to be felt the fastest. So yes, they can click early, but no, I'm not moving them to number one just yet. Trust still gotta be earned. And this is exactly why I want questions like this. The best comments don't stay in the comment section. They become part of the show. Now, let's get back to the AFC North, because the two teams carrying the biggest expectations in this division are still sitting on the board. We got the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to give them guys a B+. And this is where the conversation changes. Cleveland, they trying to find answers. Pittsburgh, they trying to manage a transition in real time, right? Baltimore's supposed to be chasing championships. That's a different standard. That's a different pressure, different expectations. Nobody hangs banners for potential. Nobody celebrates almost. Nobody throws a parade for being close, right? And at some point, results become the only thing that matter. And that's the world that Lamar Jackson is living in right now. He got 2 MVPs, one of the most gifted quarterbacks we've ever seen. One of the most respected organizations in football. Yet and still, every season seems to end with the same conversation. Like, what happened, bruh? So, let's look at the draft, right? Baltimore started round 1 with the guard. Round 2, edge. Round 3, receiver. Round 4, another receiver. Round 5, they added cornerback help, tight end, and a running back. They had 3 fifth-round picks. And then came the punter in round 6. Now, take a step back and look at the board. You got 2 receivers. You got 2 tight ends, a running back, 2 offensive linemen. There's 7 offensive additions, and that's not an accident. The front office knows exactly where the spotlight is pointed. Lamar Jackson. Everything is built around helping Lamar get over the hump. He got more protection. He got more weapons. He got more depth, more options, basically. The organization isn't trying to rebuild. They're trying to finish the job. I like the class. I like the direction. I like the logic. What I don't know is how quickly these pieces can help Lamar Jackson. Jacoby Lane, he's a talented receiver. Jacoby Lane is a talented receiver. Elijah Surratt is talented. Matthew Hobner is talented. Josh Cuevas is talented. Adam Randall. So, the talent isn't the issue. It's the experience, man. Baltimore is asking young players to help solve veteran expectations. And that's a tough assignment. The fantasy managers will probably start with Jacoby Lane. Sarada is another name worth monitoring. But the bigger story isn't one rookie. The bigger story is whether this offense finally becomes more complete around Lamar Jackson. Because eventually, expectations turn into pressure. And Baltimore is carrying real pressure. Not just playoff pressure, not wild card appearance pressure. We're talking about championship pressure. The Ravens drafted for help. Now it's time to see whether their help arrives fast enough. Best believe we'll all be here tuned in for it. Now let's go. Let's move on to Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Bengals, they get a B. The lowest grade in this division. And if Baltimore is carrying pressure, Cincinnati is carrying a whole bunch of receipts. The money has been spent, man. Investments been made. Now everybody wants a return on their investment. So the Bengals received the B, but some people would think that's low. And honestly, I understand both sides of it, right? On paper, Cincinnati, they didn't have a first round pick though. They did not have a first round pick. And the problem with that argument is, the first round pick turned into Dexter Lawrence, right? So, and he might be the biggest addition any AFC North team made this offseason. I guess Trey Hendrickson to the Ravens was the big one too, though. But for years, the Bengals' issue hasn't been scoring points, right? Joe Burrow has proven he can score points at a premium. Jamar Chase, he can score points. T. Higgins can score points. The defense has been a problem. We watch Cincinnati lose games by putting up 30-plus points, man. And that's not supposed to happen. So the front office attacked the issue. So first came Dexter Lawrence. Then they added edge rush, Cassius Howell, cornerback, Tacario Davis, center, Connor Lew, wide receiver, Kobe Young, offensive tackle, Brian Parker, tight end, Jack Indries, defensive tackle, Landon Robinson. So there's talent. There's no question. My concern is balance. That's what I'm more concerned with, the balance. When everybody knows the defense has been the weakness for years, I expect the Cincinnati to lean even harder into fixing it. But instead, it kind of felt like a split decision. Part offense, part defense, And maybe they're right, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. Now let's talk about Joe Burrow, man. Everybody knows how I feel about Joe Shiesty. He's a top 3 quarterback. No debate from me, right? But greatness comes with responsibility. And at some point, the conversation changes, man. People stop asking, can he get there? Because he already got there. Now they start asking, when is he going to get back? When is he going to win? Joe Burrow, he already climbed the mountaintop. He scaled the mountaintop. He reached the Super Bowl. He lost it to the Rams. Now the standard changes, man. Now it's about finishing that climb. You got to get all the way up there. And that's why I got Cincinnati carrying the highest expectation in this division, right? Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Sexy Dexy, Chase Brown, new defensive pieces. The investment phase is done. Now it's time to collect. It's time to pay up. Fantasy managers, they already know the names. If you've been dealing with, fantasy for at least the last couple of years, you already know the names, man. Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Brown. That's one of the cleanest fantasy situations in football. The betting conversation is a little different. The entire season may come down to one thing. Can the defense finally hold up its end of the bargain, man? If the answer is yes, Cincinnati becomes dangerous. Point blank, period. But if they continue to allow these teams to score over 30 points, then we'll be right back here having the same conversation next year. The Bengals doesn't need more talent, man. They don't need more excuses. They need results. And that's why this team enters 2026 carrying more pressure than anybody else in the AFC North. Just so we all are on the same page. All right, so before we get to the money read, man, quick reminder, make sure you tapped in at footballismoney.com. Fantasy leagues, check. Pool party, yes. Football is money plus, that's a bet. Yes, sir. Podcast updates, man, everything we building right now lives there. All right. Now let's put the draft grades to the side. The sportsbook currently have the Ravens minus 118, the Bengals plus 200, Steelers plus 550, Cleveland Browns plus 18. That's the division odds. That's the betting board. But my expectations looks a little different, right? Number one, these are the guys that got the highest expectations, man. And I hate to do it to my guy Joe Burrow, but he can't have no more losing seasons. He can't have no more mediocre seasons. And for that reason, the Bengals come in at number one. You know, somebody has to wear the crown. For me, I think it's going to be Cincinnati this year. They spent the money. The stars got paid. The defense got reinforcements. And now, at some point, the excuses got to run out. Nobody in this division has more pressure to deliver. No one in this division has the firepower that these guys have. And there's no reason they shouldn't be winning every year. Number two, we got the Ravens. And honestly, man, Baltimore and Cincinnati are closer than people think. You know, Lamar Jackson is still one of the most talented quarterbacks of football. The Ravens remain one of the NFL's model organizations, right? The difference is simple. I don't think Lamar Jackson has ever had the level of offensive support that Joe Burrow has enjoyed over these years. And that's why Baltimore lands second. You know, they got massive expectations, just slightly less pressure. All right, number three, I want to go Cleveland Browns, man. And I know some of y'all hate this ranking already, you know, and that's fine. That is fine. But I think the Cleveland Browns improved. They had 2 first-round picks. They had a strong draft. You know, young talent across the roster. The quarterback room still feels a little chaotic, you know, but even so, I expect Cleveland to be better than a year ago. All right? And I know Pittsburgh fans definitely not going to like this. The Steelers come in at number 4. The Steelers. Last year, division champs. So they go from 1 to 4. This year's biggest question mark in the AFC North. We got Aaron Rodgers. You know, he's on a farewell tour. This will be his last year playing. Mike McCarthy is trying to launch a new era. Drew Aller, whatever his name is. My guy Drew Down is waiting in the background. The roster is getting younger. The draft was strong. I just think Pittsburgh is balancing 2 timelines at once. And that's not going to be easy. So that's why my expectation rankings goes as such. Number 1, Bengals. 2, Ravens. 3, Browns. 4, Steelers. If you disagree, great. You know, football would be boring if everybody saw it the same way, right? The question is, where will you place your money? So before we get up out of here, I got a question for you. And this might be the biggest question in the AFC North. Which AFC North team is carrying the most pressure? Is it Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, or somebody in the Cleveland camp? Which AFC North team is carrying the most pressure? Drop your answer below. And remember, the best football takes can earn gold opportunities. The best conversation can earn blue opportunities. And some of those comments might end up in next week's show. Before we get out of here, man, make sure y'all tapped in at footballismoney.com. That's where you'll find Football is Money Plus. I need y'all to sign up to that. That's where you'll find the fantasy leagues. I need y'all to join one before the time runs out. That's where you'll find the pool parties. Earn some extra money every week. Podcast updates and everything else we are building for the Football is Money community. Keep engaging. Keep hitting me up. Keep bringing football takes. And keep doing your thing. Because the best comments will not stay in the comment section. They become part of the show. All right? So, y'all already know the question, man. Drop your answer below. I'm your host. They call me Boss. This is Football is Money. And we out. I got to stop looking at myself and try to look into the camera a little bit more. The lens. I be looking at me. I need to look right here. And I see y'all next week.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to Football is Money. Find every episode and more at footballismoney.com.